This is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm the host, Andy Steele, and this is going to be an exciting one tonight. Ted Walter's back. He's the Director of Strategy and Development for AE 9/11 Truth, and he's going to be discussing an exciting new project. This is going to be the launch of a real scientific investigation into the collapse, so supposed collapse, of World Trade Center Building 7 on 9/11. He's going to be explaining why AE 9/11 Truth has commissioned the University of Alaska Fairbanks to design a computer model that will test NIST conclusions that office fires leveled the 47-story steel-frame skyscraper on that day and see if their theories really hold water. Of course, the audience who listens to this show knows from listening to the various experts that I've brought on, by watching the films put out by AE 9/11 Truth over the years, that NIST theories do not hold water. And the modeling that they did is flawed. Their whole theory is flawed. Needs to be thrown out the window, put in the trash, taken out to the curb, and hauled away to the city dump. Because anybody that watches that building come down, just instinctively, from the first moment you look at it, knows that fire alone did not bring it down. Symmetrically, free fall acceleration for 105 feet, under 7 seconds. No way, no how, buddy. The rational thinking public of the United States, the growing numbers of Americans questioning the 9/11 official story, know deep down that that building, World Trade Center 7, was brought down in a controlled demolition on that day. And the scientific evidence has proven it. Over the years, we have talked about this. We have brought on experts, as I said before. We've even written a book, Beyond Misinformation, What Science Says About the Destruction of World Trade Center Buildings 1, 2, and 7, that outlines the evidence. And this will just be one more tool to cite, one more thing under our belt, in the arsenal to grab, to show the world how NIST theories don't stand up to the basic scientific scrutiny. So this is very exciting. As I mentioned many times in this interview, this is something our supporters have been asking us to do for years. Well, it's happening now, folks. It's happening now, and AE 9/11 Truth needs your help. It needs your support. Ted will be talking about some of the ways that you can help it out. One of the ways is by going to WTC7evaluation.org. That's right, WTC7evaluation.org. You go to this website. There's a very exciting banner at the top showing scenes from the little promotional video that AE put out that introduces you to Dr. Halsey, who will be overseeing this project, and just different tabs that you can click to find out more about the model and how you can give your own input. Yeah, right there at the bottom of the webpage it says give input. So this is going to be a transparent investigation into World Trade Center 7, one in which the data is not going to be kept hidden from everybody. Imagine that. Go figure. And I think it's really important to understand fully why we need to have this new computer model and why not just NIST's own theories, which are shaky at best in their analysis, why not just those need to be tested, but also the correct information. Folks, if you go to Beyond Misinformation, if you have a copy of it, go to page number 42. Where they talk about the computer models done of the buildings that we focus on. We're going to focus just tonight on Building 7. Actually, the whole theme of the show is going to be on computer models and Building 7. But if you go to the section that says Modeling of WTC 7, I'm going to go over it with you. I think it's important to go over this because a lot of times for the sake of time, I kind of summarize the problems with NIST's analysis by saying they left out critical features of Building 7's design that when you include them, completely debunk what NIST says happened to that building, because it's not easy to cram all of that into a few sentences, what they left out or what they got wrong. Even though I've done shows covering this, I've brought on people who have made a lot of these discoveries, such as Tony Zamboti, Jerry B. from Scotland was part of the group of researchers that caught on to these problems with NIST's story. I'm going to read this section to you that outlines the problems, and I think this does a really good job of highlighting what is wrong with NIST analysis. I mean, one of the things wrong with it. So the section begins, as discussed in Chapter 4 of this booklet, NIST asserted that the 3 stages of collapse progression it measured for World Trade Center 7 were consistent with the results of the global collapse analysis discussed in Chapter 12 of NIST NC Star 1-9. This is where NIST presented the results of its computer model. However, when we view the model, we see, besides the fact that it stops after only 2 seconds, which is well before the end of collapse, that it fails to replicate the observed structural behavior in 2 important ways. First, it fails to show the 2.25 seconds of freefall that NIST finally acknowledged. Second, it shows large deformations of the building's exterior structure that are not observed in the videos. And this is a very important point. NIST came up with a model, but the model doesn't look anything like what really happened that day. So I suppose if nobody had had a camera rolling on World Trade Center 7 as it fell, NIST might have been able to get away with this. NIST might have been able to dismiss a few eyewitnesses that would have said, that's not how I remember the building coming down. But unfortunately, luckily, so I guess unfortunately for them, luckily for the rest of the world, there were cameras pointed at World Trade Center 7 as it fell. And we, as the rational thinking public, can compare their computer models with real life and realize that they don't match up. Again, there's no large deformations. And this is something that the other side will claim. They'll claim that the inside fell first and that the outside followed. And that's why it seems to come down as one uniform structure. But as Richard Gage so expertly pointed out when he was on C-SPAN's Washington Journal and this NIST talking point was thrown at him, you cannot have this happen without massive warpage taking place on the exterior. So it doesn't make any sense because that's not what happened. It was brought down in a controlled demolition. The section in Beyond Misinformation goes on. NIST also had to manipulate its modeling significantly just to get the collapse to initiate. Specifically, in order to make the floor beams under floor 13 expand and push the critical girder off its seat and allegedly trigger a total collapse of the building, NIST took the following steps. And now it's got them numbered, so I'm going to go through each of them. 1, it ignored the fact that the fire in the northeast section of floor 12 had burned out over an hour before it supposedly caused the beams under floor 13 to expand. I've got a picture of this right over my computer, folks. Frame taken from a video shot from near the corner of Greenwich Street and Park Place that shows the north face of World Trade Center 7 between 3:49 and 3:54 p.m., and the fires burn out there, folks. The fires were burned out over an hour before the building came down. So how can it be causing beams to thermally expand if there's not a raging fire there? Only in NIST computer world can that work. All right, they might as well be modeling World Trade Center 7 in the World of Warcraft. That's the only place that would make sense because there's magic in that fake world. Number 2, it omitted shear studs on girder A2001. A2001 is the girder that they say was pushed off its seat, just for clarity. That would have prevented the girder from being pushed off of its seat. Number 3, it inexplicably heated the floor beams but not the floor slab above them, thus causing the floor beams but not the slab to expand. This caused the shear studs connecting the floor beams and the slab to fail, which allowed the floor beams to move independently of the slabs. Number 4, it ignored the fact that the floor beams could expand no more than 5 3/4 inches, less than the 6 1/4 inches required to push the girder off its seat before shortening, caused by sagging, would overtake expansion. And number 5, it omitted the web flange stiffeners that would have prevented the bottom flange of the girder from folding, even if the beams had somehow expanded 6 1/4 inches. All right. So these are just some of the problems that are outlined in the booklet with their models, and this is why so many different scenarios need to be tested. So NIST story is completely in question here. Lots of problems with it. So we need your help. Go to WTC7evaluation.org. Check that out. Follow the study. Tell everybody you know about it. And listen to Ted's interview tonight. You'll be getting more details. Okay, before I play my interview with Ted Walter, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that beginning now. And that's 10 seconds. Ted Walter is a public policy analyst by trade. He's also the Director of Strategy and Development for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Prior to his current role with AE 9/11 Truth, he was Director of NYC CAN's High-Rise Safety Initiative, and he was the campaign manager for AE 9/11 Truth's Rethink campaign. He's also the lead author of the latest booklet put out by AE 9/11 Truth called Beyond Misinformation, What Science Says About the Destruction of World Trade Center Buildings 1, 2, and 7. He's going to be talking about AE 9/11 Truth's latest project, a very exciting time here at the organization and for 9/11 Truth in general. Ted, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Thanks, Andy. Always a pleasure.
So, whenever you're coming on, it's kind of like Santa Claus, and we're getting into the Christmas season here. You're always on here to talk about something exciting that AE 9/11 Truth is going to be doing. I sort of feel like Pavlov's dog's salivating here with excitement and anticipation, and this is something that we've been getting asked to do for a long time here. So, without going any further, I'm going to ask you to lay it out for the audience. Big things going on. Tell our audience about this new project.
Sure. So the project is called WTC 7 Evaluation. And what it is a computer modeling study that is being done by engineers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So this is the flagship university for the state of Alaska. And we're working with a professor named Dr. Leroy Halsey. He's been a forensic engineer for decades. He is the chair of UAF's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And what he's doing essentially is a 2-year process of modeling in detail using very sophisticated computer programs, modeling World Trade Center Building 7, and then using these models, which are supposed to be very accurate, reliable representations of Building 7, using the models and subjecting them to various conditions to see how the building behaves. And the question is, if we subject the building to various kinds of fire, will that cause the building to go down in the way that we observed on September 11th, 2001? So as I said, it's a 2-year process. Dr. Halsey is working with 2 PhD research assistants, students that are studying at UAF that he works with on other projects as well. And Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is funding the study. We have a 2-year contract with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. The contract is a little over $200,000. For a 2-year process, for this kind of sophisticated computer modeling, which in fact is very laborious because there's so many details as far as the construction of this building and every little corner of the building, modeling it accurately. $200,000 is really, we feel, a great deal for what we're getting, and really a really good investment. And the reason why it's such an important investment is that it's critical that we at AE 9/11 Truth and the larger 9/11 Truth movement have World Trade Center Building 7 modeled in a truly rigorous, scientific, and transparent process. I think we all know that the evidence of controlled demolition of World Trade Center Building 7, as well as the Twin Towers, is overwhelming. And when I say we all know, I'm speaking about those of us in the 9/11 Truth movement, those of us at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I don't speak for Professor Halsey or anyone necessarily at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. But we, funding this study, are obviously very confident about what happened to World Trade Center Building 7. That being said, the physical evidence, the testimonial evidence, the video evidence, all of those kinds of evidence are parts of the puzzle. But we're looking to expand the body of evidence to an area that is very important when it comes to the structural engineering profession, and when it comes to the sort of the forensically trying to figure out what happened to a given structure. Often computer models are used to recreate the structure and explore the ways in which the structure failed, or what is the most likely cause of the failure. And this is really taking the body of evidence to a whole other level and bringing it to a level where we are really much more able to reach members of the architecture and engineering professions and get them to listen more openly and look more closely at the collapse of this building than they have in the past. And so it's critical for expanding the body of evidence and complementing the physical evidence, the testimonial evidence, et cetera. But it's also critical for reaching new heights, going further up the tree. I think we can say comfortably that we have reached out and we have brought on board the low-hanging fruit, and we're trying to work our way up the tree now, and bring more and more engineers and architects to look seriously at the collapse of this building, and that's why we're investing in this study, and that's why we're asking our supporters all over the world to help us fund this study. And so I want to say, anyone who's interested and wants to learn more about this study, you can go to WTC7evaluation.org. Again, that's WTC7evaluation.org. And there we have several videos already posted about the study. We have a great 2-minute trailer, which is basically an introduction to Dr. Halsey and his work and what his process is going to look like. And then on the website, you can sign up for the newsletter. You can sign up to become a sustaining supporter. And we even have the opportunity for people to register to become participants in this study. And what that means is, whether you're an engineer or a scientist or just an ordinary citizen, you can actually give input on the study, because we're going to be putting out so much material that people can actually delve into and scrutinize. You can look at that material and give us input. Or if you happen to be somebody who knows something about how these buildings were constructed, there's information that's difficult for us to find, and we're hoping that people might be forthcoming with information about the building that can help us model it more accurately. So there's lots of ways to get involved, and one of the reasons for this whole transparency aspect of why we want to post all of the information about the study up on the website throughout the entire process is that we see this as the first truly transparent computer modeling study of World Trade Center Building 7. And that's because, as many of us know, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they did their own computer models of Building 7, but they won't release all of the input data for their models. And so there's no way to really scrutinize their work. And that makes it harder for the architects and the engineers that we represent to go and really scrutinize what NIST has done. And we realize that there may be questions about, is Dr. Halsey's modeling of this building objective? Is it unbiased? Is it accurate? And people can answer those questions by going and looking at the data itself. We're putting all of the data online so that anybody who wants to scrutinize it can. And that's why it's really the first truly transparent computer modeling study of World Trade Center Building 7.
Well, if you release that, won't that jeopardize public safety?
Well, that's the reason that NIST gave for not releasing the input data for its own models of Building 7, and that's just completely preposterous, when the whole reason for the NIST investigation was to promote public safety by investigating why this building collapsed and then reporting that to engineers around the world. Now they're saying, and this was an engineer that requested that information from NIST, a structural engineer by the name of Ron Brookman. He requested NIST modeling data, and they said no, to release that data, it might jeopardize public safety. And they went on to say that, basically Ron Brookman said, why? How can that be the case? And they said, well, this information could be used by terrorists to figure out how to collapse buildings. Obviously, we know Ron Brookman is not a terrorist. That's a perfect example. We have nothing to hide. We have nothing to fear. We are, Dr. Halsey is modeling World Trade Center Building 7 in a totally unbiased and accurate manner, and we're willing to put all the data out there for people to scrutinize.
Do you know how much because the number escapes me at the moment, how much the WTC 7 investigation by NIST was? I mean, this was something in the millions of dollars, wasn't it?
The overall investigation was millions of dollars. I don't know what the dollar amount was allocated to the modeling of the building. They did a few different models in different programs. They had a few different firms working on it. They also did their own simulation of the fire, of the spread of the fire throughout the building over the course of the 7 hours between the collapse of the North Tower and the collapse of Building 7. But suffice it to say, it was millions of dollars that they spent overall. We're going to do a better investigation with $200,000.
Well, and see, this was taxpayer money that paid for this thing. The fact that they can keep this under lock and key from the architects and engineers that need this information to make buildings safer, and also from the architects and engineers that want to check NIST's work because NIST's conclusions don't make any sense. The fact that they can keep this secret on taxpayers paid for this thing is an absolute travesty of justice. We are doing NIST's job for them. And this is something that they've been asking for, the supporters of AE 9/11 Truth, for years. I know that I've been getting requests at the Free Fall email box for this. People write to me and say, why don't I suggest this to AE 9/11 Truth? Just from your own estimation, how long has talk of 9/11 Truth, AE 9/11 Truth, needing its own computer model, how long has that talk been suggested? How long have we been hearing this?
I think it's been about 5 or 6 years. I would say people started talking about it back in 2009, 2010. While it's been talked about for a while, and you could say it's unfortunate that we haven't done it yet, the fact that we're doing it now, the way that we're doing it is pretty much the best possible way to do it. We're working with a public university, an established, widely respected, civil engineering professor who has decades of experience modeling structures and trying to figure out why they have collapsed. And it's through the university. It's a contract with the university. So this is not just some structural engineer in their spare time putting these models together. This is going to be a very, very careful, gradual process with an extensive literature review. The building is going to be modeled using several different software programs so that we can cross-check the results of the building's behavior, across those different programs to make sure that we have the modeling correct. It's just being done in the best possible way, in the most reliable way. And so it's taken a few years to get to where we are, but now, this is a best case scenario in terms of there's no better way to go about this.
Well, and we're doing a tremendous public service, I think. I think we've done pretty good for a group of non-government people abandoned by the government, in my opinion, on this critical issue, getting together, creating the infrastructure needed to get a network that can raise the money for this type of thing and offering the expertise to challenge the official story. And it'll be interesting to see when this thing is completed, how the media will react to it. If this were some other situation, let's say this was some disaster in which a bridge collapsed because of an earthquake or something like that, something that was of public note but didn't have as much controversy surrounding it. If an individual group did something like this, media would talk about it and probably talk about that group like they were doing a tremendous public service. In this case, we're addressing something that has been the center of controversy, not just from AE 9/11 Truth, but other groups and other scholars who are not affiliated with AE have raised questions about World Trade Center 7. The fact that this has not been adequately explained by our government has made our country less safe, in my opinion, because it sowed the seed of distrust, necessary distrust, justified distrust. But there you go. That's not good for America. So we are taking the bull by the horns and doing this service for the public. But it'll be interesting to see how the media reacts to it when this is done. We're not getting a lot of help from the media. So that's why we need our audience to be the media, too. I'm curious, why did you pick the University of Alaska Fairbanks? What's it about that university that stood out and made you guys want to go with that?
Well, really, it was Dr. Halsey. It was finding Dr. Halsey. AE 9/11 Truth has a supporter who lives in Alaska. He used to live in South Carolina, actually, but he moved to Alaska. And for several years, he's one of those folks who really wanted, believed that the 9/11 Truth movement, AE 9/11 Truth, most likely should do a computer model of Building 7 as well as of the Twin Towers. And so he reached out to many engineering professors. One of those, eventually he met Dr. Halsey. Dr. Halsey and him, were kind of in conversation for a couple of years, I would say. And then eventually the circumstances just became right for Dr. Halsey to take on this project. And so really it has to do with the fact that this professor is, he's courageous, fearless. He doesn't care about the controversy. He thinks that the collapse of this building needs to be looked at properly. And he thinks that he looks at the failure of lots of structures, usually structures that are not as big and complicated as Building 7. And so when he sees a structure like Building 7 go down in 6.5 seconds and symmetrically into its footprint at free fall acceleration, for him that's a problem. And he feels that it needs to be, if fire indeed did collapse this building, or if it didn't, either way, he feels that it needs to be looked at by more people. And he as he's doing the literature review for the study, he's actually quite surprised to see how little research has been done about the collapse of this building. That's right now one of his major findings of his literature review is just how little this has been researched by members of the academic engineering community, he believes that it needs a second look.
So tell us a little bit more about Dr. Halsey and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, I wish I had his resume in front of me, but you can go to the UAF website. You can just Google Leroy Halsey UAF and find out more about him than I could tell you right now in detail. He has a PhD in civil engineering. He's a civil engineer. He's a forensic engineer. He's a member of several national associations of engineers. He was the head of the Alaska chapter, or the Fairbanks chapter of the American Society of Civil Engineers for a time. He has worked in the private sector. He had his own engineering research firm for many years. He's worked as a professor not the University of North Carolina, North Carolina State, I want to say, as well as now at the University of Alaska Fairbanks for around some 20 to 30 years. He has published many papers. He's renowned for being an excellent teaching professor. He gives a lot of attention to his students. And that's why students were, really excited to work with him on this study, and why he has 2 exemplary PhD research assistants working with him. And so it was a combination of all his background. He's also designed many structures. He has his own engineering firm that he does work on the side with. so it was a combination of his background, his expertise, and just having the right mentality to look at it with an open mind, look at it really scientifically and objectively, and put aside the politics and the controversy. I want to really emphasize the fact that he's going to look at every single possibility, every single cause that has been put forward. He's going to look at that, and he has no, obviously you can say everyone is biased, but in my view, the process that he has constructed for this study attempts to take out the bias as much as possible. So, if he's looking at every single process, every single condition that could have made this building collapse, where's the bias really? As long as he's accurately modeled that building, let's see what fire does to this building. Let's see what happens to this building if we subject it to an extraordinary fire larger than we know what happened on September 11th. I don't see the bias in that, and so I'm very confident that this is the mentality that he's coming at this with is just the ideal scientific approach, and he has the right motivation and mindset for doing it in the right way.
Right, and while you were talking, I was doing exactly what you told the audience to do. I Googled his name. I went to the UAF website, and it says Dr. Halsey has a university and corporate experience. Before coming to the university, he owned and ran 3 high-tech engineering research corporations. He taught at the University of Missouri-Rolla, North Carolina State University, and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And he's been an active researcher. He's served as a department head and participated in numerous university committees. And you look at these honors, he's got an impressive list of honors. He's got a long list of publications and journal articles, reports. Even he has a book listed here. So that's good enough for me. This gentleman seems like he brings a lot to the table. And I'll be happy to see more about his work and find out more about what he's kind of like some of the processes that he's going to go through as he constructs this model. And I want to get into that because this is a fascinating topic to me as I learn more about how engineers do these things, especially living here in the Bay Area now, seeing how the buildings are constructed on hills, so you have to construct a building and take into account the slant, take into account that there's a lot of earthquakes out here and what happens if a certain size of earthquake hits this building. Well, how will it perform? They do a lot of preemptive modeling, I guess, in that case as these buildings are being constructed. So just from your own knowledge, and I know you're not an expert on these things, but from just what you've learned, what are some of the considerations that go into creating a model like this?
Well, the first thing is that you need good drawings to work with. You need ideally ample information about the construction of the building, structural calculations done by the engineers who are designing the building. As-built drawings are ideal. So as-built drawings are drawings that are done, that are sort of updated or done as the building is being built, because there's always going to be at least minor modifications that are made as you're actually constructing the building, modifications compared to what was originally designed. In this case, I will say, unfortunately, we don't have all that because it's sort of a rabbit hole of circumstances and supposed reasons why the information about this building doesn't exist. But the story goes that all of the documents regarding this building were kept in one of the twin towers, I believe the North Tower, as well as Building 7 itself. And the Port Authority and Silverstein Properties had offices in those buildings, and they went down, and so we lost a lot of the drawings that pertaining to Building 7. NIST was eventually given shop drawings or erection drawings of the building, and that is what they largely based their computer modeling on, was the erection drawings, which still give you a lot of detail about the construction of the building, but don't fill in all the answers, and it doesn't give you the as-built condition of the building, how the building ended up being actually constructed. That being said, what Dr. Halsey is going to do, there were a lot of, I would say, assumptions that were made by NIST, assumptions that were very favorable to their hypothesis that the building came down due to normal office fires. Certain features that we have very good evidence existed in the building, structural features of the building were omitted from NIST's computer modeling. The key one being stiffener plates that would have prevented a girder from coming off of its seat, being pushed allegedly by beams that were thermally expanding into that girder. Where there are holes in the information, Dr. Halsey is going to look at, sort of both possibilities. He's going to look at the assumption that there were Nelson studs that were basically attaching the concrete to the steel beams, acting as a composite component. And then he's going to remove that assumption and say, okay, what if there were not Nelson studs? What if the concrete and the steel were not connected to each other? That's an example, because there's debate over whether there were Nelson studs or not. He's going to look at it both ways. And that's something that, for example, NIST, rather than kind of looking at it from all angles, only made assumptions that were favorable to their hypothesis. So there's a lot of that. There's like, how good is your information about the building, and what assumptions do you have to make if you don't have all the information? You want to make the most rigorous assumptions, look at all scenarios, rather than making assumptions that are just favorable to your hypothesis. He's going through, this, as I mentioned before, he's using different programs to model the building, because he wants to make sure that the structural response that he gets when he, say, subjects the building to a certain temperature fire in a certain place, he wants to make sure that he gets the same exact response in both programs, because that is what tells him that he has, properly, effectively, accurately modeled the building. And so there's a number of steps to get there. He's using AutoCAD to lay out the geometry of the buildings, and then he's using a program called SolidWorks, which he's using mainly to focus on the behavior of the connections between the columns and the beams. And then he's using a program called SAP 2000, which is widely used in the engineering profession. That's a more common software for modeling structures by structural engineers, and a little more basic. And then he's using a more sophisticated one called Abacus, which is the one that's really going to do the most as far as simulating the building's response to heat from fires. But he's going to be cross-checking the results from the Abacus model against results from the SAP 2000 model to make sure that everything was done properly. And so part of the reason why this, as I said, these studies are complex and often expensive because they're laborious. Already, and I should have said this from the beginning, they have been working since May of 2015. So, 6 months ago, they started this process. They went through a very laborious process of laying out the geometry of the building based on the shop drawings, and constantly doing cross-checking their work, having each of his research assistants look at the other's work to make sure that there were no errors, because there are so many details to where you have the chance of screwing up and putting in the wrong number or whatever. And so there's just a huge amount of quality control that's required. So that sort of in a nutshell answers your question of what are some of the considerations. As we get further along, then you start to really look at the literature. What have other people said about why this building collapsed? And you start looking at different scenarios and seeing what kind of structural behavior you get when you subject the building to this set of conditions. They're also going to look very carefully at the spread of the fires throughout the building. They're going to, scrutinize the fire spread that NIST says occurred. and ask whether that is really possible, whether that really makes sense. They're going to create sort of an upper bound, as I said, worst case scenario. They're going to put together their own idea or their own model of how they think the fires spread through the building based on the evidence that we have. And they're going to look at NIST, but they're also going to look at a worst case scenario of, let's just say that this thing was completely loaded with combustibles and it burned like a torch, for hours and hours. What happens in that scenario? How does the building respond? So those are some of the considerations. There are several stages. There are several different factors, and fortunately, we have somebody really excellent working on it to make sure that we get it right.
That sounds interesting. So they're going to be, essentially, once they have the model made, they're going to be playing with it and doing whatever they can to try to bring this building down in the way that we saw it on video come down. And I wanted to talk to you about that because this actually gets into one of my questions I was planning to ask you about whether or not it's going to take into account just the government's data. And what I mean by this is, like, for instance, NIST claims that there was fire raging in the area of supposed collapse initiation, but the photos show that the fire was out over an hour before. So are they going to look at not just the data that NIST says was the case, but also look at like what the photos really show was going on at that time?
Yeah, they are going to look at the photos of the fires. They're going to look at the research that's been done, probably by folks like Chris Sarnes, who really he did a very detailed, outline or scenario of how the fires traveled through the building. They're going to look at what NIST said and see how that stacks up against the evidence, the photographic evidence, video evidence, etc. There's also surprisingly, there have been a few studies here and there, often PhD level work, dissertation work, looking at the fires in Building 7, and so they're going to look at that as well. I would say right now it's unknown how detailed they will get in terms of this is the fire pattern that we think happened on 9/11. Whether they're definitively going to come up with their own model of the fire behavior. But whether they come up with a definitive model of the fire behavior, whether or not they do, they're going to look at various scenarios and not just stick with the pattern of fire behavior that they think was most likely.
Right. It sounds like they're going to play around with it. Like they're going to come up with a number of different circumstances. They're going to give the government the benefit of the doubt on just about everything that the NIST asserts happened and still test it. And then they're also going to look at other scenarios too. So that's why this is so important. It's going to look at everything. I think that's awesome. And, we were joking around earlier about jeopardizing public safety by releasing this information. But seriously, do you think that this is going to put more pressure on NIST to release its input data? I know it's speculating a little bit. But do you think this could play into that public pressure to have NIST show its cards?
It's hard to say. It depends in part on how much attention this study gets. And, we made a decision at a certain point to publicize the whole process and allow people to follow and scrutinize the research as it was being conducted. And part of that is that we hope that people in the engineering community start paying attention to it well before it's done. We also hope that the media starts paying attention to it before it's done and not just at the end. So a lot of it depends on how many people start following the study. And then it also depends on how much success Dr. Halsey has in publishing his research and his findings once the study is completed. At the same time, I think that's a totally plausible scenario that NIST will just not respond at all, no matter how much traction or attention the study gets, that NIST doesn't respond at all and doesn't want to, cave to any sort of pressure to release its modeling data. And the more that they stick to that, the more that they sort of, incidentally kind of strengthen the credibility of this study, because here we have a group of engineers, researchers who are not afraid to put everything out there to be scrutinized. So I think naturally, you're going to have a little more faith in the folks who are willing to show everything.
And that's another question I wanted to ask about him publishing his results. So a paper is going to come along with this, essentially explaining his findings, explaining what happened with all of these different scenarios then.
Yeah, he's going to have a final report as part of the study under the contract that we have with the university. It'll probably be a very lengthy, extensive report, probably not as long as the 10,000 pages of the NIST report, but it'll be very lengthy. And then he will also be, from that point forward, begin, writing articles and submitting them to engineering journals around the country and maybe around the world, depending on how much success he has getting published in the country, in the U.S. So there's two different steps as far as publishing the results: the report for the study, and then publishing the findings in articles in engineering journals.
Now, you've explained some ways, obviously, how this is going to be different from NIST models, the fact that we're going to be transparent with the input and the findings, also that it's going to run through a bunch of different scenarios and not just favor one that's the least controversial and least disconcerting when you look at the outcome of it. But what other ways are there, if there are any, that this is going to be different from NIST computer models that you know of?
I think that's the gist of it, what we covered. He's going to look at everything. He's going to look at, in the areas where favorable assumptions were made in the NIST models, he's going to look at both scenarios, with Nelson studs, without Nelson studs, with a stiffener, with the stiffener plates, without them, et cetera. That's the biggest thing. And he's going to, as I said before, subject the building to much worse conditions than what we know existed on 9/11. That's what I can say with confidence. I know that there are many things that they're doing differently just because it's a different process, and Dr. Halsey has taken the process that he thinks is going to result in the most representative models. I know that they're doing something different with the connections. The connections are the parts that connect the columns to the beams. They're modeling the connections through SolidWorks, and this is a little bit technical, but they're going to create a model of the behavior of the connections, but not the physical properties or the physical shape of the connections themselves. A lot of the modeling work that's been done in the past by NIST and by some engineering firms that were involved in lawsuits was modeling in great detail the connections themselves, which ends up making the models take days and days and days and days to process different calculations and simulate different scenarios. They're going to take a more efficient, I wouldn't say simplified, it's not simplified, but it's a more efficient process of modeling the behavior of the connections as opposed to the structure of the connections, if that makes sense. And so they have essentially mathematical formulas that represent the behavior of the connections. But if you're an engineering person, if you're somebody who has experience modeling structures like this, once you start delving into the research that we're going to be posting on the website, I think you'll find that there's going to be a lot of differences in this process compared to the NIST investigation.
So, getting to our supporters, obviously a lot of people are going to be very excited about this. Like I said, this is something that has been asked about for years. You guys wrote, when you sent out the bulletin on this, that this is your investigation. Now, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that, because I think that kind of touches on the points I was talking about earlier, the fact that we're having stuff kept from us that we paid for as taxpayers. But can you just elaborate on that section? This is your investigation. What do you mean? How do you want people to soak those words in?
Well, I would say for many years now, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and our tens of thousands of supporters have been calling for a new investigation. Our petition specifically is addressed to Congress, asking Congress to open a new investigation. Obviously, that hasn't happened, and that's not likely to happen anytime in the near future. And so we are, at this point, in a sense, we're taking matters into our own hands, and we are sort of crowdfunding and getting the public to support a new investigation being done at a public research university at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And this is really the first transparent, unbiased, independent investigation that's being done. Aside from all the research and analysis that's been done over the years, this is at least the first computer modeling investigation that's been done of Building 7. And so instead of asking for it at this point, we're making it happen. And what that means is, we have this contract with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which is already part funded, but we are asking for our community, for our supporters who've been supporting our work for years, to pitch in just a little bit right now to help us fund this study through April 2017, and get sort of this is like the wedge that will get this very important research into the engineering community in a way that and allow us to make inroads to the engineering community in a way that we haven't yet. Computer modeling is just sort of a higher currency when it comes, is a very high currency when it comes to the engineering community. It's very potent. People pay a lot of attention to it. It's one of the major elements of any forensic investigation of a failure of a serious structure. And so, we're asking people to chip in for the next 17 months to get this study funded. And we're taking matters into our own hands now.
Yeah, it's kind of like in these third world countries where the road needs to be built, for instance, and people wait for the government to come ahead or go ahead and do it, and they never come. So the villagers end up going out and making their own road out of the dirt or mud or even concrete that they have available to them, and it just gets done because they did it. Well, it's kind of like what's happening now with this Building 7 study. I mean, we've been waiting for a transparent modeling of this building for years, simply asking for NIST to release its input data. I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for them to do that because they don't want to. I mean, we've had people talk about that on the show so many times before. So we need to do it. We need to go ahead and have our own investigation. We need to nudge our government officials aside, the ones who have been covering up this issue and trying to put it out of everyone's mind for the last 14 years that since this has happened. And we need to have our own investigation, the real investigation into what happened to this building. And if the other side wants to challenge it, if they want to try to dismiss it, well, let's see what their facts are. Let's lay our cards on the table. Our stuff is transparent. Our makeup is off. Our masks are off. All right? Well, take your masks off. Let's see your information. I think that this is going to serve in raising the stakes here. Because why should people defer to the government's explanation if they're keeping stuff behind lock and key? When our stuff is transparent and out in the open, why should they trust NIST models over our own? The website is WTC7evaluation.org. We will link that in the description. People can donate. Again, this is your investigation. This is your study. You're participating in history. We're doing the things now at AE 9/11 Truth that folks 5 years ago used to talk about in the context of, wouldn't it be cool if AE 9/11 Truth could ... Those things are happening now, and mainly because of your support out there, because of the supporters spreading the word, becoming sustaining members, doing these things to help us in our efforts and bring you things like the computer model, bring you things like the Beyond Misinformation booklet, which is now selling like hotcakes and being spread around. The PDF version goes out everywhere. The booklet has been passed around by several thousands, maybe even, I would say, even chance to say 1 million people now. So we're getting the word out there, and we just need your help. Spread the information, donate if you can, but mainly keep on talking to your friends and neighbors about what AE 911 Truth is doing. Tell them about this computer model and let the word of mouth be the media, as it always has been, even before large corporations got everyone watching a little flickery blue box and getting their information from that and keeping their eyes focused on just that flickery blue box and turning each other off. We need to return to the days when people trusted each other and listened to each other for the news again, because the news that we're getting out of that flickery blue box isn't really accurate and isn't really working in the public's best interests. Ted, I guess I'm going to ask you for your concluding words on this. What are other ways that people can help us out? Anything you want to leave our audience with as we look forward to this model coming out?
As I mentioned before, the opportunity to give input is a big one. So if you go to the homepage, WTC7evaluation.org, you'll see that there's a big button there that you can click on and basically register to become someone who provides input in the study. And one of the things that Dr. Halsey has emphasized to me many times over the past year is that sometimes the most important information that you get, the most critical advice or information, doesn't necessarily come from one of your experts. Sometimes it comes from, just an ordinary citizen. When he used to be, run his own engineering research firm, there was he had a story about the janitor saying something, that completely changed the way that they went about doing one of their projects. So we really invite input from everyone who has anything constructive to say, and that's a big one. Of course, as I said, we need your support financially. It's not an overly expensive study, but it's also not cheap, and so we need your help raising that $200,000 over the next year or so. And please pass around the videos. We have several videos on the website. They're already getting thousands of views in the last 5 days. Share those videos. Let people know who Dr. Halsey is by sharing that 2-minute trailer. And also, if you have any connection to any communities and any engineering schools, universities, colleges around the country and around the world, we really want the involvement of students and professors everywhere. What we're seeing is sort of the shackles coming off. We've had unprecedented attention from sort of local engineering groups in Alaska. The student chapter of the American Society of Civil Engineers had Dr. Halsey come and present. The Associated General Contractors of Alaska invited Dr. Halsey to present, and both of those presentations are up on our website right now. The American Institute of Architects, the American Society of Civil Engineers, all these groups have invited Dr. Halsey to speak, and that's just the beginning of it. We think over the next year and a half, 2 years, that dozens, if not hundreds, of groups and schools are going to ask Dr. Halsey to present on this, and this is really going to be the first opportunity for the academic engineering community to pay attention to Building 7. And this study is sort of giving people the permission to do that, to finally start talking about the collapse of this building.
That's it, folks. History is happening right here, and you can be a part of it. Give your input. Do whatever you can to spread the word. Let people know who Dr. Halsey is, like Ted says. Ted, you are kicking butt. Everybody that's working hard here at AE 911 Truth and all the supporters out there, too, giving their hand whenever they can. So, Ted, good luck, and thanks again for coming on 911 Freefall.
Thank you, Andy.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.